The rescue that changed everything. The battlefield was a graveyard of metal and fire. Smoke curled into the dark sky, and the distant echoes of explosions shook the ground. Captain Jack Carter moved carefully through the wreckage, his rifle ready. His mission was clear: secure the area, eliminate any threats, and report back. But then he heard something unusual. A faint, desperate whimper. Jack frowned. He followed the sound through the ruins of a crashed alien transport ship. Inside, bodies lay scattered, most of them lifeless. His boots crunched over broken metal and shattered glass. Then he saw her. A small alien girl, barely alive, was curled up behind a wrecked console. Her blue skin was covered in dust and blood. Her glowing green eyes were wide with fear. She was breathing fast, clutching her arm, where a strange symbol shimmered faintly. Jack hesitated. This girl was not human. His orders were clear: eliminate all hostiles. The war between humans and the alien species known as the Tari had been raging for years. The Tari were seen as enemies, invaders who had no place in human territory. But this girl, she didn't look like a soldier. She was just a child. Jack knelt beside her, lowering his rifle. "Hey, kid, you're hurt." She flinched, pressing herself against the wall, her breath ragged. Jack removed his helmet, showing his face. "I'm not gonna hurt you." His voice was calm, gentle. "I promise." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she fainted. Jack cursed under his breath. He checked her pulse. Weak, but she was still alive. His radio crackled. "Captain Carter, report. Is the area clear?" Jack looked at the girl. If he reported her, she'd be taken for interrogation. The military wouldn't care that she was just a child. They'd treat her like a threat. He made his decision. The area is clear. No survivors. He lifted the unconscious alien girl into his arms and carried her away. A dangerous escape. Jack knew he was breaking every rule in the book. If anyone found out he had saved a Tari child, he'd be labeled a traitor. But something in his gut told him this was the right thing to do. As he reached his hoverbike, the girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. "Where?" she whispered, her voice shaky. "You're safe," Jack said. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Zyra." Jack nodded. "All right, Zyra. We need to get out of here." But just as he was about to start the bike, his radar beeped. Enemy ships inbound. Jack's heart pounded. The Tari weren't the only ones after Zyra. The chase begins. Jack gunned the engine, speeding across the war-torn landscape. Behind him, 2 black fighter drones appeared, scanning the area. "Damn it," he muttered. Zyra clung to him, her small fingers digging into his armor. The drones locked onto them. A warning shot exploded nearby. Jack swerved, dodging through the wreckage. If he didn't shake them, they were dead. Zyra suddenly grabbed his arm. "Go left," she shouted. Jack didn't question it. He veered left, just as one of the drones crashed into a collapsed structure, exploding on impact. Jack stared. How did she know? But there was no time to ask. The second drone was still chasing them. Zyra clenched her fists. The symbol on her hand glowed brighter. The drone's system flickered, its flight path going erratic. Then it spun out of control and crashed. Jack slowed down, his mind racing. "Zyra," he said carefully, "what did you just do?" She looked at him, her eyes full of fear. I don't know." But Jack knew one thing for sure. This girl was not normal. And whatever power she had, someone out there wanted her badly. A new mission. They arrived at Jack's hidden outpost, a small underground shelter away from human military bases. Jack patched up Zyra's wounds, giving her food and water. She ate carefully, watching him. "You saved me," she said softly. Jack exhaled. "Yeah, guess I did." She hesitated, then asked, "Why?" Jack didn't have a clear answer. He had seen too much death in this war. He had followed orders for years, but for once, He listened to his heart instead of his command. "You remind me of someone," he finally said. Zira didn't ask who. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." Jack knew this was just the beginning. Whoever was after Zira would not stop hunting her. She was more than just a lost child. She was a secret waiting to be uncovered. And now Jack had a new mission. Protect Zira at all costs, even if it meant going against his own people. A bond forged in war. The underground shelter was dimly lit, filled with old supplies and scattered weapons. The only sound was the quiet hum of the ventilation system. Captain Jack Carter sat against the cold metal wall, staring at the small alien girl he had just rescued. She was sleeping, curled up on an old blanket, her breathing slow but steady. The dirt and dried blood on her face made her look fragile, but Jack knew there was something more to her. That symbol on her hand, the way she controlled the drone's system. She was no ordinary child. Jack sighed and leaned back, rubbing his face. What had he gotten himself into? He had broken protocol, lied to his own men. If the United Earth Forces, UEF, found out, they would brand him a traitor. But when he looked at Zira, sleeping peacefully, he knew he couldn't regret it. The morning after, Zira woke up to the smell of food. She blinked, her glowing green eyes adjusting to the dim light. Jack was cooking something over a small stove, dehydrated ration packs mixed with water. It wasn't much, but it was warm food, and that was rare in a war zone. She sat up slowly, watching Jack carefully. "You hungry?" he asked, tossing her a metal plate. Zira hesitated. Then she picked up the spoon and started eating fast, like she hadn't eaten in days. Jack chuckled. "Slow down, kid. You'll choke." She ignored him, finishing the plate in seconds. Then, for the first time, she smiled. Jack stared. It was such a small thing, but in the middle of a war, a child's smile felt like a miracle. Memories of the past. Zira wiped her mouth and sat cross-legged, staring at Jack. "You are different," she said softly. Jack raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "The other humans. They kill my people. You saved me." Jack sighed. "Not all humans are bad, Zira, just like not all Terry are soldiers." She hesitated. Then she lifted her left hand and traced a finger over the glowing symbol on her skin. Jack leaned forward. "What is that?" Zira looked down. "I don't know. It has always been there. My people said it was a gift, but—" She frowned, struggling to find the right words. Jack studied it carefully. The symbol wasn't just a marking. It was alive, shifting slightly like it was reacting to her emotions. Whatever it was important. And it was the reason she was being hunted. The danger returns. Just as Jack was about to ask more, his warning alarm blared. He jumped up, grabbing his rifle. The motion sensors outside had been triggered. Someone was here. "Zira, stay behind me," he whispered, moving toward the door. She nodded, pressing herself against the wall. Jack peered through the security camera feed on his wrist console. His breath caught. 3 black-clad UEF soldiers were moving through the ruins outside. They were looking for something, or someone. Jack's heartbeat pounded in his ears. His own people were here. If they found Zira, they would take her. If they found him with her, they would kill him. He had to think fast. A risky escape. Jack turned to Zira. "Listen to me carefully. We have to go. Now." Zira nodded. She didn't ask questions. She trusted him. Jack grabbed his gear and a small bag of supplies. Then he led Zira to a hidden tunnel beneath the shelter, an old maintenance shaft that led to an abandoned outpost. Just as they climbed down, Jack heard the door of the shelter burst open. "Search everything," a voice barked. Jack cursed under his breath. Too close. He and Zira moved quickly through the narrow tunnel. It was dark, damp, and smelled of rust. Zira held onto his sleeve, her small fingers trembling. Then, suddenly, boom! An explosion shook the tunnel. Dust rained from above. Zira gasped, stumbling. Jack caught her before she fell. "They found the tunnel entrance," he said grimly. "We have to run." A desperate race. They ran through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing. Behind them, shouts and gunfire rang out. Jack knew they couldn't outrun trained soldiers forever. He spotted a broken ladder leading up to an old warehouse. "There, go." Zira climbed up first. Jack followed, covering their escape with his rifle. As soon as he reached the top, he yanked Zira behind a stack of crates. They held their breath as the soldiers entered the tunnel below. One of them stopped. They were here. Another soldier pressed his comm. "Sir, we lost them." Orders. Silence. Then, a cold voice came through the radio. "Find them. Captain Carter is now a fugitive." Jack's stomach dropped. There it was. He was officially an enemy of his own people. A new beginning. Jack looked at Zira. She was staring at him, eyes wide with fear. "You saved me," she whispered. Jack exhaled. He wasn't sure if he had saved her or doomed them both. But one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. He had to protect Zira, no matter what. Even if it meant fighting the entire United Earth forces. The enemy's true face. The cold night air was thick with tension. Captain Jack Carter and Zira crouched in the shadows of an abandoned industrial complex, deep within the ruins of an old human colony. The stars above were distant and cold, offering no comfort. Jack peered through the cracks of a broken wall. UEF soldiers were sweeping the area, their armor glowing under the dimmed streetlights. The distant hum of a patrol drone sent a shiver down his spine. They were still looking for him, for both of them. Zira shifted uncomfortably beside him, hugging her knees. Her glowing symbol pulsed faintly, as if reacting to her fear. Jack noticed and whispered, "You need to stay calm, kid. Whatever that thing is, it's drawing attention." Zira looked up at him, her glowing green eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know how to stop it," she admitted. Jack exhaled. He had no idea what to do either, but he knew one thing for sure. Staying here was a death sentence, a hidden message. Jack pulled out his holopad, activating the encrypted messages from an old contact, Agent Juno, a former intelligence officer who had gone rogue years ago. If anyone could help them, it was her. A distorted message played. "Carter, if you're seeing this, it means you've gone off the grid. I don't know what you did, but the UEF wants you dead. And they're not the only ones." Jack frowned. "Not the only ones." The message continued. "There's another force in play. Something older. Something dangerous. If you've got the girl, get out of human space. Now. Before they find you first." Jack clenched his jaw. Who else was after Zira? Before he could think further, Zira suddenly grabbed his arm. Her expression turned pale, her body stiffened as if she had been struck by an unseen force. "Zira." Jack shook her lightly, but she didn't respond. Her eyes darkened, her body trembling. And then, in a voice not her own, she whispered, "They are coming. A new enemy appears." Jack's instincts screamed danger. He grabbed his rifle, scanning the area. Then, a deep, guttural growl echoed through the ruins. Jack turned, his heart hammering. A shadow moved between the wreckage, something big, fast, and not human. Zira gasped, clutching her chest. "They found us," she whispered. And then, a monstrous figure stepped into the dim light. It was tall and armored, its body covered in thick, organic plating like living steel. Its eyes glowed red, filled with an unnatural hunger. A Drekar warrior. Jack had heard the rumors. The Drekar were an ancient race, older than both humans and Terry. They were ruthless, highly advanced, and never involved themselves in human conflicts. Until now. The Drekar warrior stepped forward, its voice deep and inhumanly smooth. "Give us the girl, human, and we will let you live." Jack raised his rifle. "Not gonna happen." The warrior smirked, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Wrong answer." and then it attacked. The battle in the ruins. The Drekker moved like lightning, faster than any human soldier Jack had ever faced. It lunged forward, its clawed hands swiping toward Jack's head. Jack barely dodged, rolling behind cover and firing his rifle. Blue plasma rounds scorched the creature's armor, but it barely flinched. "Jack!" Zira cried. The Drekker swung its arm, sending a chunk of debris flying straight at Jack. He barely ducked in time, feeling the shockwave as it smashed into the wall behind him. Jack knew he couldn't win this fight head-on. He needed a plan. "Zira, stay down," he shouted. The Drekker lunged again, but this time, Zira's symbol flared up. A pulse of invisible energy rippled through the air. The Drekker staggered, growling in pain as its armor cracked slightly. Jack took the chance and emptied his rifle into its exposed weak spot. A direct hit. The Drekker roared in pain, stumbling backward. But before Jack could finish it off, the creature activated a cloaking field and vanished into the shadows. It wasn't dead, and it wasn't alone. Jack grabbed Zira's hand. "We need to go. Now." She didn't argue. As they ran, Zira looked up at Jack. "Why do they want me?" Jack didn't have an answer. But deep down, he knew Zira was more than just an ordinary alien child. She was the key to something far greater, a deadly revelation. They reached an old hangar where Jack had hidden a stolen starship. As he powered it up, Zira sat quietly, deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. "Jack, I think I remember something." Jack turned to her. "What is it?" She hesitated, touching the glowing symbol on her hand. "I remember. A voice. Before my people were destroyed." Jack leaned in. "What did it say?" Zira looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "It said, 'Protect the heart of the galaxy at all costs.'" Jack's blood ran cold. Heart of the galaxy. He had heard that phrase before. It was an ancient legend, something powerful, something lost to time. And now, every major force in the galaxy was after it. Zira wasn't just being hunted. She was the key to the greatest secret in the universe. Jack clenched his fists. If that were true, then protecting Zira wasn't just about saving a child. It was about stopping a war that could destroy everything. And for that, he would fight anyone, even the entire universe. The escape and the betrayal. The stolen starship roared to life, its engines humming beneath Jack's fingertips. He gripped the controls tightly, feeling the tension in his chest. Zira sat beside him, her glowing green eyes darting around the cockpit. She was still shaken from the encounter with the Drekker, her small hands trembling slightly as she clutched the straps of her seat. Outside, the ruins of the abandoned colony stretched for miles, but Jack knew it wouldn't be safe for long. The UEF was still searching for them. The Drekker wouldn't stop hunting them. Jack exhaled. They needed to leave. Now. "Hang on, kid," he muttered, flipping the ignition switch. The ship lurched off the ground, dust and debris swirling beneath them. Zira flinched as she looked out the viewport. "Jack, something is coming." Jack's pulse spiked. "What?" Before she could answer, his radar blared. Multiple ships. Fast. And closing in. A deadly chase. The moment they hit open space, Jack saw them. 4 UEF warships, sleek and deadly, moving in formation. Their weapons locked onto him. A cold voice crackled over the comms. "Captain Carter, you are ordered to stand down and surrender. Do not resist." Jack recognized the voice. His gut clenched. Commander Riggs. An old friend. A trusted soldier. And now, his enemy. Jack tightened his grip on the controls. "Sorry, Riggs. Can't do that." Riggs sighed through the speakers. "Jack, you know I don't want to do this, but you left me no choice." Jack's heart pounded. "I didn't leave you a choice. The UEF is hunting a kid like she's some kind of war criminal. You know that's wrong." A long pause. Then Riggs said, "She is not just a kid, Jack. You have no idea what you're protecting. Jack exchanged a glance with Zira. The moment of silence was broken by the blazing streak of laser fire. The UEF ships opened fire. A battle among the stars. Jack slammed the throttle forward, his ship diving into an unpredictable spiral. Energy blasts zipped past, barely missing them. The ship shuddered under the force of the Nereids. Zira gripped the edge of her seat. Jack. Hold on. Jack yanked the controls, sending the ship into a dangerous dive toward the debris field of an old space battle. The UEF ships pursued, their weapons lighting up the void. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't outgun them. He had to outsmart them. His eyes locked onto an abandoned battleship floating in the wreckage, its hull torn apart, but its reactor core still glowing faintly. Jack smirked. Let's see if you boys can keep up. He steered the ship straight toward the wreckage. The UEF ships followed, their shots tearing through broken metal structures. But Jack weaved dangerously close to the debris, dodging between twisted wrecks and shattered hulls. Warning. Proximity alert. The ship's AI blared. Jack ignored it. One UEF ship wasn't so lucky. It miscalculated a turn and slammed into the debris field, exploding on impact. 3 left. Zira's eyes widened. That was intentional. Jack finished. But the remaining UEF ships weren't backing off. They were adapting. And then Riggs' voice returned. You're good, Jack, but I know all your tricks. The betrayal. Without warning, a gravity well missile locked onto Jack's ship. Shit. Jack tried to maneuver, but the gravitational pull was too strong. His ship lurched violently, spinning out of control. They were being pulled into a trap. Jack slammed his fist against the controls, trying to break free. Damn it, Riggs. You don't have to do this. A moment of silence. Then, it's not personal, Jack. It's orders. Jack clenched his jaw. Then you were never my friend. Riggs didn't respond. The ship shuddered as its engines failed. The tractor beam activated, pulling them in toward the UEF command ship. They were caught. Zira pressed against the window, fear in her eyes. Jack, what do we do? Jack exhaled. He had one last move, but it was risky. He turned to Zira. Do you trust me? She nodded without hesitation. Jack grabbed his sidearm, activating the ship's manual override. As the docking bay doors opened to pull them in, Jack disabled the safety protocols. The ship would power down for 10 seconds before resetting. Stay close, kid, he muttered. As soon as the ship was inside the docking bay, Jack grabbed Zira, blew open the emergency hatch, and jumped out before the power came back online. Behind enemy lines, Jack and Zira landed hard, rolling across the steel deck of the UEF hangar bay. Alarms blared. Soldiers rushed forward, weapons raised. Jack fired first. A stun blast took down one guard, then another. He grabbed Zira's hand, dragging her toward the security doors. Where are we going? She panted. Jack gritted his teeth. We're getting out of here. But as they rounded the corner, Riggs stood there, waiting. Armed soldiers surrounded him, rifles trained on Jack. Game over, Carter, Riggs said. Put the gun down. Jack's grip tightened. He could fight, but Zira would be caught in the crossfire. For the first time in years, Jack Carter was out of options. Zira stepped closer to him, whispering, Jack, I can stop this. Jack turned to her, his heart pounding. Zira, no. But it was too late. Her symbol glowed brighter than ever before, and the entire ship shook violently. The lost homeworld. The UEF command ship trembled as an unseen force rippled through its metallic halls. Lights flickered. Sparks danced in the air as control panels overloaded. Jack Carter had seen a lot in his years as a soldier. He had fought alien warlords, piloted ships through asteroid storms, and survived battles that should have ended him. But nothing prepared him for what he was witnessing now. Zira stood in the center of the corridor, her symbol glowing like a star, her eyes blazing an eerie green. And the ship was reacting to her. Jack turned, his instincts screaming at him to move, to do something, but his body felt frozen. All around them, UEF soldiers collapsed, their weapons short-circuiting in their hands. Even Commander Riggs, the man who had once been his closest ally, staggered back, eyes wide with something Jack had never seen in him before. Fear. Then, Zara whispered a single word, and everything changed. The awakening. The pulse of energy exploded outward like a shockwave, crackling through the air, tearing through the ship's systems. Panels burst apart. Sirens wailed in agony. The steel floor shook beneath their feet. Jack grabbed onto a railing, pulling Zara close. "Kid, what are you doing?" Her lips trembled. I don't know," she whispered. And then, for the first time since Jack had met her, Zara collapsed. Jack caught her just before she hit the ground. Her skin was ice cold, her breathing ragged. "Damn it." He shook her gently, but her eyes had already closed. And then the alarms changed tone. Instead of security alerts, the ship's AI spoke in a voice it had never used before. "Warning. Unauthorized energy signature initiating containment protocolo omega." Jack's gut clenched. That wasn't a normal protocol. Riggs cursed under his breath, struggling to his feet. "Jack, what the hell did she just do?" Before Jack could answer, the walls split apart, revealing something far worse than soldiers. The Drekker return. The ceiling above them groaned, bending inward as if something massive was pressing against it. Then, in the blink of an eye, the ship wasn't alone anymore. Jack turned toward the viewport, and his blood ran cold. A Drekker mothership had appeared out of nowhere, materializing from what looked like a fold in space. Its surface rippled like living metal, hundreds of glowing red eyes blinking across its hull. And then, a voice, deep and ancient, filled the entire ship. "You have awakened the lost one, and now she will be ours." Jack's grip on Zara tightened. "Like hell she will." Riggs cursed. "Jack, do you realize what's happening?" He turned to the viewport, his face pale. "That's a Drekker Prime vessel. Those things haven't been seen in human space for centuries." Jack barely heard him. His focus was on one thing, getting Zara out of here. But before he could act, the Drekker attacked. The battle for Zara. The first explosion rocked the UEF command ship. Metal tore apart as the Drekker's energy lances pierced through the hull, cutting through steel like paper. Jack shielded Zara with his body as the corridor shook violently, sparks raining down around them. Riggs grabbed his comm, shouting into it. "This is Commander Riggs. We are under attack. All units, prepare for emergency engagement." A blazing energy bolt struck near his feet, sending him flying. Jack didn't waste a second. He threw Zara's limp body over his shoulder and sprinted toward the nearest escape route. "Jack, where the hell are you going?" Riggs shouted. Jack didn't stop. "I'm getting the kid out of here." The revelation. Jack dodged falling debris, his mind racing. He needed a ship, any ship. Then he saw it. A Tari artifact, hidden beneath layers of security doors. In a section of the UEF vessel he hadn't realized existed before, was a strange-looking pod, alien in design, glowing with the same energy as Zara's symbol. Jack had seen a lot of weird things in his life. But this felt important. Desperate, he pressed his hand against the console, and to his shock, it responded to Zara's presence. The pod opened, revealing a small cockpit with just enough space for 2 people. Jack didn't think. He jumped in, secured Zara in the co-pilot's seat, and slammed the activation switch. Instantly, the pod came to life. And then, it launched. The escape. The Terry-pod tore through the ship's hull like it was nothing, a shimmering blue shield surrounding it as it burst into open space. Jack barely had time to catch his breath before the pod jumped into slip space, something no human ship could do without a gate. The stars bent and blurred. The last thing Jack saw was the UEF command ship collapsing in flames as the Drekker descended on it like vultures. And then, darkness. The lost homeworld. Jack's head throbbed. Slowly, he opened his eyes. The pod had stopped moving. Outside the viewport, an endless silver ocean stretched as far as he could see, the sky above glowing with twin suns. A massive ruined city sat in the distance, its structures half submerged, ancient, untouched by time. Jack exhaled. They weren't in human space anymore. He looked at Zyra. Her symbol was pulsing faintly, but she was still unconscious. Then a voice, not from the ship, not from Zyra, but from outside, whispered, "Welcome home, lost one." Jack's pulse spiked. This wasn't just another planet. This was Zyra's home, the place she had been taken from, the place that held all the answers. And somewhere in the ruins ahead, buried beneath centuries of forgotten history, was the truth about who Zyra really was. The final battle begins. A silent arrival. Jack Carter woke up to the sound of silence. For the first time in what felt like forever, there were no explosions, no sirens, no gunfire, only the distant hum of wind and the soft lapping of waves against the ship's hull. He opened his eyes, his vision still blurry. His body ached, his muscles stiff from the brutal escape. Then he remembered. Zyra. He turned his head sharply. There she was, still unconscious in the co-pilot's seat, her small frame rising and falling with shallow breaths. Jack exhaled, tension leaking from his shoulders. She was alive. Then he looked outside the viewport, and his breath caught in his throat. A city, but not just any city. A dead city, half submerged in endless silver waters, its towers rising like the bones of a long-forgotten civilization. Massive stone obelisks stood covered in vines and glowing symbols, whispering of a past no one remembered. The sky above was alien. Two suns burning in eerie harmony, casting a strange blue light over the ruined metropolis. Jack didn't need a map to know the truth. They had arrived at Zyra's lost homeworld. But something about the place felt wrong. It was too quiet, as if something was waiting for them. The awakening. A sharp gasp broke the silence. Zyra sat up suddenly, her eyes wide and glowing brighter than ever before. Her symbol pulsed like a heartbeat, its golden energy illuminating the dark cockpit. Jack moved closer. "Kid, you all right?" Zyra's breathing was ragged, her fingers clutching the seat. Then, slowly, she whispered, "I remember this place." Jack's pulse quickened. "You do?" She nodded, her voice trembling. "This is where I was taken from. My people. They lived here." But now, her eyes scanned the ruins beyond the ship, filled with sorrow. "Now, they're all gone." Jack set his jaw. "Maybe not all of them." Zyra turned to him, confused. Jack motioned outside. "Someone spoke to us when we landed, remember? Welcome home, lost one." Zyra's eyes widened. She wasn't alone. But before she could say anything else, the ship's proximity alert blared. Jack's gut twisted. Something was coming. The guardians of the past. Jack grabbed his rifle, motioning for Zyra to stay behind as he stepped onto the cracked stone platform outside. The air was warm, thick with the scent of salt and old earth. The ruins stretched out around them, massive structures covered in alien carvings, stories lost to time. And then, movement. From the shadows of the broken buildings, figures began to emerge. At first, Jack thought they were human. But as they stepped into the light, he realized the truth. They were Terry. Survivors. Their skin was a deep blue, their eyes glowing like Zyra's. Some were old, their faces lined with centuries of sorrow, while others were warriors, clad in armor made of shimmering energy. One of them, a tall woman with silver markings on her forehead, stepped forward. She looked at Zyra, her expression unreadable. Then she bowed. The lost one has returned. Zira's hands shook. You know me. The woman nodded. You are the last of the royal line, the true heir of the Terry Empire. Jack's heart stopped. Zira was royalty. But before he could process it, the ground rumbled violently. A deep, monstrous sound echoed through the sky. The Drekker had arrived. The final war begins. Jack grabbed Zira's hand. We need to move. Now. But the Terry leader stepped forward, her expression calm. It is too late. They are already here. Jack turned toward the horizon, and his blood ran cold. A Drekker invasion fleet loomed above the ruins, its massive ships descending like silent predators. Hundreds of black-armored Drekker soldiers emerged from the shadows, their glowing red eyes locked onto Zira. And then, a single figure stepped forward, a Drekker warlord, twice as tall as a human, his armor made of pure void energy. He lifted his massive blade, pointing it at Zira. Give us the girl, his voice thundered, or your world burns. Jack raised his rifle. Over my dead body. The Drekker warlord smiled. That can be arranged. And then, all hell broke loose. The battle for the galaxy. The ruins erupted into chaos as the Tari warriors charged forward, their weapons clashing with the Drekker invaders. Blades of pure energy met claws of living darkness. Explosions shook the ground. The sky burned with fire and war. Jack fought like a man possessed, his rifle blazing as he took down enemy after enemy. But the Drekker were endless. He turned to Zira. She stood frozen, her symbol pulsing like a dying star. She was afraid. Jack grabbed her shoulders. Zira, we need you. You have to fight. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know how. Jack's voice softened. Yes, you do. It's in your blood. You were born for this. She stared at him. Then, something clicked. Zira's expression hardened. She clenched her fists, and her symbol erupted into golden fire. The sky itself seemed to crack open. The Drekker hesitated. For the first time, they looked afraid. Zira stepped forward, her voice no longer trembling. This is my home, and I will not let you take it. She lifted her hands, and the ruins answered. Massive stone obelisks trembled and rose into the air, ancient weapons awakening from their slumber. The true power of the Tari had returned. The war had begun, and Zira was ready. The reunion and the ultimate sacrifice. A sky on fire. The Tari homeworld burned. The once silent ruins were now a battlefield, filled with the deafening sounds of blaster fire, clashing blades, and the monstrous roars of Drekker warlords. Jack Carter had seen war before. He had fought in battles that shattered planets, seen entire civilizations rise and fall. But nothing compared to this. This wasn't just a war. This was the final stand of an entire species. And at the heart of it all stood Zira. Her golden symbol blazed like a dying star, her eyes glowing with raw power. She no longer looked like the scared child he had met on a battlefield. She looked like a queen. And Jack knew this was the moment she was meant for. The last stand. Jack fired shot after shot, his rifle overheating. But the Drekker just kept coming. He took cover behind a fallen stone pillar, panting heavily. Across the battlefield, the Tari warriors fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered. The Drekker warlord, twice as tall as any human, his body covered in void armor, moved through the battlefield like a storm, cutting down everything in his path. And then, his eyes locked onto Zira. Jack's gut twisted. He was coming for her. Zira, he shouted. Move. But she didn't run. She stood her ground. As the Drekker warlord raised his blade, Zira lifted her hand, and the ruins answered her call. Massive stone obelisks rose from the ground, pulsing with forgotten energy. The air itself crackled with ancient power, the homeworld of the Tari awakening after centuries of silence. The Drekker warlord hesitated. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Zira clenched her fists. "This is my world, and I will not let you take it." She stepped forward, golden energy swirling around her like a hurricane. The true power of the Tari had returned. The heart of the galaxy. Jack watched in awe as Zira lifted her hands, and the heart of the galaxy revealed itself. From beneath the ruins, a massive golden sphere of pure energy rose into the sky, its light so bright it turned night into day. It was alive, pulsating with the power of an entire civilization. And then it connected with Zira. Her body arched as the energy flowed through her veins glowing like molten gold. The Drekkar warlord realized too late what was happening. Zira had become more than a warrior, more than a queen. She had become the last hope of her people. And she wasn't afraid anymore. The ultimate sacrifice. Jack barely had time to react before the Drekkar warlord lunged at Zira, his blade aimed for her heart. Jack didn't think. He just moved. He threw himself between them, and the blade pierced his chest. The world blurred. Pain flooded his body. His knees buckled. Zira screamed. Jack collapsed, coughing blood, his vision dimming. "Jack!" Zira dropped beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed against his wound. He tried to smile. "Guess I owed you one, kid." Zira shook her head violently. No, you can't." But it was too late. He could feel his heartbeat slowing. The Drekkar warlord loomed over them, ready to strike the final blow. And then, Zira snapped. Her scream shattered the sky. The heart of the galaxy exploded in golden light, the energy surging through her body. And in a single, blinding moment, the Drekkar army was erased from existence. A second chance. Jack felt weightless. He saw flashes of his past, his days as a soldier, his regrets, his choices. But mostly, he saw her, the small alien girl he had once saved, the child who had changed his life. And then a voice, soft, familiar, filled with love. "Come back, Jack." Light surrounded him. His body repaired itself, the wound on his chest sealing with golden fire. And suddenly, he was breathing again. His eyes flew open. Zira was there, her hands glowing with the last remnants of the heart's energy. She had saved him. Tears filled her eyes. "You saved me first." Jack let out a shaky breath, smiling weakly. "Guess that makes us even." The reunion. The battlefield was silent. The Drekkar were gone. The sky was clear. The war was over. Zira stood at the center of the ruins, her eyes scanning what remained of her home. The Tari survivors gathered around her, bowing deeply. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "Looks like you've got a kingdom to rebuild." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Then softly, she said, "Stay with me." Jack hesitated. He had always been a soldier, always been a drifter. But for the first time in his life, he had found something worth staying for. He smiled. "Yeah, kid, I'm not going anywhere." Zira's eyes shimmered. She had lost everything once. But now, she had found her family again. And this time, she would never let it go. Epilogue. The legend lives on. Years passed. The Tari homeworld flourished once more, its ruins rebuilt, its people thriving. And at its heart, a legend grew. The legend of the lost princess and the human soldier who defied the stars. Side by side, they protected the galaxy together. And whenever war threatened the stars again, one name echoed across time. Zira, the last queen of the Tari. And the man who stood by her side. Captain Jack Carter. The soldier who chose love over war. The man who saved a child. And in doing so, saved the universe.